Hello folks, this week of course saw the release of World of Warcraft's latest minor content patch 11.07, which includes a new mini-zone, Siren's Isle, and a new powerful ring for everyone. In my video preview for that new patch, I predicted that we'd likely see some buffs to the new ring, Circe's Circlet, as on the PTR it had been looking decidedly meh. Instead of waiting for the patch to release, Blizzard, it seems, decided to try and get ahead of that and get the buffs out of the way before the release, with the announcement of a very substantial item level increase on Monday this week. Instead of launching at item level 619 and scaling up to 639, it is instead launching at item level 639 and now scaling up over the course of 6 weeks all the way to 658. This almost certainly means that by the time it is fully upgraded, it will be well worth using in most, if not all, specializations, and will very likely be used well into Season 2 by most players. The starting item level, which thanks to a week 1 upgrade is effectively 642, suggested that it would also be likely to be an upgrade for most people right off, but sadly that's turning out not to be the case. The lack of any secondary stats in the ring means that until you socket in the various gems which you can collect on the Isle is pretty much useless. It's fortunate then that you can get the first 4 gems just by doing the various quests and events in the island, which takes maybe around an hour to an hour and a half. All well and good, except for one thing. It appears that, like the ring updates, the gem acquisition is also heavily time-gated, with those 4 gems that I mentioned being the only 4 that you can actually get at all this week. While 2 of the gems are pretty decent for most players, the other 2 gems, while interesting, are focused around healing or group support, which means that for the vast majority of classes, the ring represents a significant DPS power loss, even when you compare it with a standard 619 ring. With the modern player base being almost exclusively focused on DPS, to the extent that even many healers pass up on healing trinkets, the effect of this is that for the majority of players, I suspect they may want to stick the ring into their bank until the day comes that they feel it's actually usable. Unsurprising then that the most predominant feedback from the community for this patch is all around the time gating. Regular viewers of my videos will have heard me mention the importance of first impressions in video gaming, mostly in the context of newer players, but this is, I think, a very good example of how those first impressions also matter for more established players. Progression over time is a major component of MMOs, and done well it can be fun. What is not fun is getting a reward that in effect takes you backwards and asks you to do even more work in order to regain that lost ground. Even when the ring eventually does turn out to be pretty decent, and it will for most players, this negative first impression will, I suspect, mean that it will taint any enjoyment that could have come from having it develop in this way. Hopefully we'll get the more desirable gems in the next week and not towards the end of that 6-week acquisition path. This issue though does mean that I personally will not rule out us seeing another round of buffs for the gems that we got this week before the Christmas break. One pretty decent piece of news that did come out though is that the gems that we do require are now warband until equipped, and thanks to a vendor they can be readily obtained and sent off to alts once you unlock the gem first on your main. And in practice, getting the ring in an alt is also a very fast process. You just do a couple of quests and then you're granted a skip that will give you it there and then. So that alt-friendly theme is thankfully being continued even with the ring. Moving on to the rest of the patch though, and along with the patch come the next chapter of the story in the War Within. This provides a fair bit of setup for that next major patch, with Moira and Magni heading back to Ironforge and most likely bowing out of the narrative for now, and the focus switching towards the Haranir, Arwena and the Goblins, most notably including Monty Gaslow and the return of an old protagonist, at least for Alliance players, in Jester Gallywix. The action takes us through to the Ringing Deeps and very strongly suggests to me that the entryway to the new Undermine zone is going to be right off the deeps. Unfortunately, in what's proven to be a bit of a theme for the new patch, the other main quest line, the fate of the Kirin Tor, was nowhere to be seen, and instead we've got a 21-day countdown timer over Cadwar's Head, suggesting that that new content is not going to be available until around January the 7th, with that quest line being listed at the top of the quest journal as having 2 chapters. I'd personally not rule out an even longer wait to see it through to its conclusion. Moving over to the new zone, Siren's Isle itself, and with the current content feeling very much like it's running out of runway for a lot of players, it was definitely nice to have some new stuff to explore. And despite the zone as widely reported being fairly small, there certainly is a lot to explore, with an extensive underground vault, 3 mini events, and a weekly rotation of different types of enemy NPCs. My own day 1 experience was pretty enjoyable, with a bunch of quests, some repeatable and some not, along with a world quest that unlocked access to the zone's storm phase, essentially a second version of the island with slightly harder enemies and more rares and even more quests. Add in some interesting rewards, and the first impressions of the zone were certainly very positive. The day 2 experience though has been a little bit different. Zoning in day 2, we arrived to a single daily quest, and that's part of a 10-day long chain to get a cool mount. But, well, that's basically it. Sure, there are still rares and treasures to farm for the achievement, but I'm not convinced that the primary loop of farming enemies for a currency is really all that compelling. At the time I upload this, it is still to be confirmed, but based on the PTR, we're expecting that the world quests and other quests will reset on a weekly basis, meaning a kind of feast and famine approach, with plenty to do in day 1 of a new week, but things being pretty sparse thereafter. And if you're someone who just wants to get the ring, or maybe just to get the mounts from the zone, that will probably be quite enough. But if you're a world content player looking for a bit more to do on a regular basis, I'm not so sure that this is going to hit the mark for you. And that for me is the story so far of this patch. There is plenty of great content, but the pacing of the content delivery, be it the ring and gems or the storyline, just seems at first glance to have been stretched out a little too thinly. With a minor patch like this likely to last us only around 8 to 10 weeks, having major rewards like a fully upgraded ring or flying only be fully available 2 to 3 weeks before the next major patch drops just feels a little bit too little, too late to me. The storyline in Siren's Isle isn't the only new content. This week also saw the launch of the Winterveil holiday, which has had some updates. There aren't any major changes to the event, sadly, but the main feature, the Abominable Grinch Elite Encounter up in House Rad Foothill, has gained a fun new mechanic where he throws giant presents at us, which we can then dodge and loot for some fun effect. And if that is enough to make you want to pay it a little visit, that's now got a whole lot easier with the addition of a cool sleigh ride, fast travel from Dornegal up to the main event areas in Ironforge and Orgrimmar, from where you can then pick up a second ride out to the Grinch area. Sadly, that is a one-way trip, but it nevertheless sure does save a lot of time. Hunters are also getting a brand new reindeer term. Then there's actually 2, one with a red nose and one without. Getting these requires dressing up in full Christmas outfit and then heading into the old Hillsbrad Foothouse dungeon. I'll link a guide down below for those of you who want to give it a go. Overall, while the roadmap's description of new content for Winterveil is technically accurate, these changes aren't really on the scale I would have expected from that description, but it is nevertheless some fun additions to the festive event. Moving over to the main seasonal content, and after last week's major announcement of a boost to Crest acquisition in Mythic Plus, this week Blizzard also moved in one of the other major sources of feedback in Mythic Plus, and that is the tanking scene, with some fairly targeted and also sizable nerfs to incoming damage in Mythic Plus dungeons. This was predominantly focused on Mythic Plus Trash Pack Tankbusters, which in my view have been a major contributor to the relative unpopularity of tanking in the current season. These changes do give me a lot of confidence that Blizzard are now aware of the issues around tanking, and I'm personally hoping that this will feed into the next season's dungeon design to hopefully improve tanking and entice more people to tank. something that is badly needed to get those wait times that it takes to form groups down to more manageable levels. The other big news this week was the announcement of the patch 11.10 PTR, which most likely due to the holiday break will not be going live on the servers until the new year. But we did still get a bunch of new information over and above the information we got from the Warcraft Direct event. Firstly, as a quick recap, we're going to finally get to visit the Undermine part of the Goblins' original homeland. There's going to be a new dynamic ground travel system called Drive with a customizable vehicle which can travel at up to 4 times normal ground speed. Unfortunately, that does mean that there are going to be further flying restrictions in this new patch. There's also a brand new dungeon, Operation Floodgate, which will be joining the seasonal pool along with the remaining 4 War Within dungeons, and also Theatre of Pain, Motherlode, and Mechagon Workshop. The new raid is an 8-boss raid called Liberation of Undermine, and there's also a new arena PvP map coming. We did though also get a bunch of brand new details announced. This included the names of the 2 new delves, Excavation Site 9 and Side Street Sluice. We're also getting a new customizable delve mount with a gold customization from Zekvir's hard mode. And there's going to be some new curios to hopefully add a bit more build choices to Bran. Moving over to the raid front, and the raid is going to be dropping 2 new mounts, one of which is going to be a mechanical Tyrannosaurus Rex. Tier sets are going to be a little bit different, with the 2 set bonus being role based instead of being spec based. But don't worry, the 4 set is still going to be based around your specialization. And story mode is also making a welcome return. And finally in the announcements was the confirmation that the main login screen will now allow us to unlock some additional scenes to display. There's also going to be a favourite system giving the ability to randomise those scenes once we collect them. And finally, the main login screen will now allow us to unlock some additional campfire scenes. And there's also going to be a favourite system giving us the ability to randomise those scenes if we want to. And for those of you who've been finding that giant unified list of characters a bit bothersome, we're also going to be able to get the ability to create up to 20 different groups for our characters. And those groups, we will be able to name them, which hopefully should bring a bit of order to the madness. But that's just the announced updates. Data mining is already underway and is revealing a few much more spicy changes that may also be in the pipeline. As always, I will not be talking about story spoilers here, but I am going to include some unannounced gameplay changes. Do keep in mind that until these go live in the PTR or are officially announced, they are not guaranteed to make it into the live game. Raiders may be getting a new renown-based progression track, something that will probably be a bit similar to the Delver's Journey, and this may well include those stacking health and damage buffs, along with a chance to get a free augment rune every week, the raid skip, and even a raid portal and dinars. Yes, the dinar may be back on an evergreen basis. Raiding has felt like it's been in a bit of a long, slow decline since the Shadowlands Season 1, and so it's great to see the team are looking at innovating on the raid reward front. For fans of Delves, the main issue from Season 1 of hitting a very early progression wall at item level 619 may also be getting a bit of a solution, with early signs that Gilded Crests will be reliably dropping from a new Gilded Stash, which will be available from a Tier 11 Delve. How useful that will be will very much depend on drop rates. In my view, the drop rate of Rune Crests at only 2 per Delve has been far too low. But if this turns out to be a meaningful drop rate, it could be a game changer, especially for those players who felt the need to try to jump from their level 11 delves right into a Mythic plus 7 or 8 key with no preparation for the higher difficulty in those Mythic plus keys. And on the Mythic plus front, while there have been no major data mine changes, the new Keystone Master Mount has been discovered. And it appears that Blizzard are departing from the pattern of previous expansions of using recolors of the same mount for the entire expansion. The Season 2 mount is the Crimson Shredder tank, a goblin-themed spider mount. As always though, the devil is going to be in the detail, and for that we are going to have to wait until that all-important PTR becomes playable. But once it does go live, you can be sure that I will be covering all of the most interesting details right here in my regular weekly news update. And finally, there is something for lore fans. It has been quite a while since Blizzard have released one of their mini comics. The last I vaguely recall was released at the end of Battle for Azeroth, and as it turns out, one of the main characters of that comic, Illyria Windrunner, is now featuring in a fresh comic, which provides a little update in which she, Khadgar, and Turalyon have been getting up to since the fall of Xal'atath in a fun little holiday-themed encounter. I'm a big fan of these free side stories. It's a much better way to deliver lore than locking it behind books that only a minority will read, and I will drop a link in the description so that you can catch up. There is though just one thing that is a little bit odd. Without dropping any spoilers here, there is a bit of dialogue in the comic that strongly suggests to me that the events in that story take place after the fate of the Kirin Tor storyline in-game. And in fact, there is a bit of a subtle spoiler for the in-game story, which would mean that this has been released out of order. But you know, I guess that's Timegating for you. This is the last regular news update of 2025. Blizzard generally shuts down over the holiday break, as do many of us in the community, and so the weekly news update is going to be taking a 2-week break. That does not mean there will be zero content though. Next week I'm going to be releasing my review of World of Warcraft's 2024, and what a year of ups and downs it has been. And the following week I'll have a preview of what I suspect is going to be a pretty pivotal year for the game. Either way, if you are not a subscriber, then do make sure to hit the subscribe button now. I'm on my final push to get to the all-important 1000 subscriber mark, and helping me get there is by far the best way to support my channel. And if you've enjoyed this update, then do also hit the like icon to let me and the YouTube algorithm know that I am on the right track. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.